Welcome to Dark Files of the USSR. This is the channel where we uncover crimes, secrets, and the darker realities hidden behind the image of Soviet order. Today's story is about a Soviet married couple whose crimes did not look dramatic at first glance. There were no dramatic escapes, no glamorous disguises, and no political slogans. Instead, there was something colder and disturbing. A husband and wife who came to treat poisoning as an ordinary solution to frustration. Their names were Anton and Maria Maslenko, and they became central figures in one of the strangest murder cases exposed in the late Soviet period. The Maslenkos were not exposed because investigators had been tracking them for years. The case broke open in Kiev in 1987 after a mass poisoning at school number 16. A dishwasher named Tamara Ivanutina was arrested after students and staff became ill, and several people died. During the investigation, authorities traced the poison to thallium, and then discovered that Tamara was not acting alone. She came from a family in which poisoning had become an accepted method for dealing with people considered inconvenient. That family included her parents, Anton and Maria Maslenko, and her sister Nina. What made the Maslenko couple so unsettling was not just that they participated in murders. It was the apparent normality of their motives. According to later reporting on the case, they did not reserve poison for some extraordinary crisis. They used it over property disputes, resentments, and conflicts that in most homes would have ended with an argument, a complaint, or a damaged relationship. In their world, poison became a household tool. That is why this story fits the title so well. They made murder feel routine. Investigators concluded that the broader Ivanutina Maslenko Matsobori family committed poisonings over an 11-year period beginning in 1976. According to later accounts that drew on the investigation, 40 poisonings were proven, and 13 of them were fatal. Tamara was found personally responsible for the largest share, but the parents were not peripheral figures. They were part of the pattern, and according to retellings of the case, they also helped pass this method on to their daughters. In other words, this was not simply a criminal household. It was a household in which a culture of poisoning had taken root and endured for years. One of the reasons the case still stands out is the petty nature of some of the motives attributed to Anton and Maria Maslenko. Reports on the investigation say they poisoned a neighbor in a communal apartment because he watched television too loudly. Another relative was targeted after making a remark about a puddle near a toilet. These details matter because they show how small the threshold had become. The victims did not have to represent major threats. In some cases, they only had to irritate the couple, challenge them, or cross the family in a minor conflict. The violence did not seem driven by desperation or panic. It seemed woven into ordinary domestic thinking. The family's access to poison also reflected a grim kind of practicality. Accounts of the case say a family acquaintance connected to a geological institute supplied the substance over a period of years after being told it was needed for killing rats. The poison involved was connected to thallium compounds, including a heavy liquid known as Clerici solution. Once investigators identified it, the scale of the danger became clearer. This was not a single impulsive act. It was repeated access to a deadly substance that could be used quietly and without immediate suspicion. Poison can imitate illness, accident, or simple misfortune. In a family willing to use it repeatedly, that made it especially dangerous. By the time the school poisoning brought the family under serious scrutiny, investigators were looking at far more than one incident. The evidence led backward into earlier deaths and attempted poisonings. The school case opened the door, but once the inquiry widened, authorities began to see a longer chain. One especially chilling detail from later reporting is that while Tamara was already under investigation, the parents allegedly tried to poison another woman by offering her pancakes. The woman grew suspicious, fed them to her cat instead, and after the animal died, contacted the police. Whether or not that single moment decided the case, it captured the same pattern seen throughout the investigation. Poison offered in everyday life, hidden inside an act that looked harmless, familiar, even hospitable. This is what makes Anton and Maria Maslenko different from the image many people have of murderers. They were not presented to the public as larger-than-life monsters. They were an older Soviet couple whose crimes seemed woven into domestic routine, and that ordinary appearance made the story more disturbing, not less. The Soviet home was supposed to be a place of stability, discipline, and predictability. But this case suggested that inside one family, ordinary meals, neighborly contact, and family visits could become vehicles for violence. It also mattered that the crimes emerged in the late Soviet period, when public confidence in institutions was already under strain. The case did not become famous because it symbolized one single national crisis. It became famous because it revealed how much could stay hidden inside ordinary life for years. A poisoning in a school kitchen drew attention because schools were places associated with safety and routine. But once the investigation widened, it pointed back to homes, relatives, neighbors, and private grudges. The legal outcome reflected the scale of the case. Tamara Ivanutina received a death sentence and was executed in 1990. Her sister Nina was sentenced to prison. Anton and Maria Maslenko also received prison terms, reported as 13 years for Anton and 10 years for Maria, with their ages taken into account. Both later died in custody. Those sentences closed the case legally, but not historically. The story remained one of the most unusual poisoning cases in Soviet criminal history because it combined family complicity, petty motives, and a method of killing that blended into daily life. What this case reveals is not only the danger posed by one family, it reveals how murder can become normalized inside a closed moral world. For Anton and Maria Maslenko, according to the case record, as later described, poison was not a last resort. It was a habit of thinking, a shortcut, a way to remove people they disliked, envied, resented, or found inconvenient. And that is what makes the story still chilling today. Not spectacle, but routine. Not chaos, but domestic calculation. Not a sudden descent into violence, but a gradual acceptance of it as a practical answer to ordinary frustration. That is why the Maslenko case still belongs in the history of Soviet crime. It was not the loudest case, and it was not the most public at first, but it exposed something uniquely disturbing, the possibility that a family could absorb murder into daily life and continue for years until a larger tragedy finally forced the truth into the open. This is Dark Files of the USSR. If you want more fact-based stories about hidden crimes, buried tensions, and the darker side of Soviet history, subscribe and stay with us.